Mosul, where Human Rights Watch says it's concerned by the US-led coalition's authorization of airstrikes. We're continuing to follow this story all week. It's such a big story, that's why. Now, civilians there have been caught up in the bombing campaign against Islamic State. For its part, Amnesty International's launched a petition calling on the US and Iraqi authorities to investigate the rising death toll. But during a Congress hearing, the American military and lawmakers said the operation, despite all the casualties, is justified.
هذا القصر هاي قدام عينك هاي كل الضغط هذه والحمد لله والشكر.
The implication is now we are carelessly dropping bombs and killing civilians.
We have not relaxed the rules of engagement.
زين ليش هوني ماكو دقة؟ خراب صواريخ تطلق. هو داعش يفاره جرد يعني شد تضربون تهجمون المدينة راحت انتهت.
I do believe they understand our sensitivity to civilian casualties and they're exploiting that.
الدولة الإسلامية أذتنا كثير، جوعتنا، مي ماكو، شرب، نفط محروقات ماكو، مواد غذائية ماكو.
It is going to become more and more difficult to apply extraordinarily high standards for the things that we're doing, although we will try.
An RT crews on the ground in Mosul. Murad Gazdi have heard from locals there who say the fighting's destroyed their homes and their lives.
In Mosul, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Death can come from anywhere, and you quickly learn to be afraid of everyone. We stopped at this crossroads because the view here really epitomizes what Mosul has been through. In freeing the city from ISIS and their terror, the United States-led coalition and the Iraqi army have resorted to methods no less terrifying than those of ISIS. The neighboring street, all but destroyed. The street across, rubble. The street over there, it's the same story wherever you look.
طلعنا من القصف وخلصنا من ضيم داعش، خلصنا طلعنا من هنا، يوم 8 بالشهر طلعنا.
كان في اطلاق من الطيران بشكل كبير مكثف بالمنطقة هاي.
اي بس يعني كان يضرب بيتي وقع 5 6 تقدر تفوت بالفرع وتشوف تصور.
You don't need to go anywhere. You don't even need to turn your head. No matter where you look in Mosul, devastation abounds.
بس يعني كان يضرب بيتي وقع 5 6 تقدر تفوت بالفرع وتشوف تصور. اي طيران يضرب على مود شخص واحد يوقع بيت كامل.
As intended by ISIS. The more that die, the merrier for them. What is confusing is that the Iraqi military, backed by US-led air power, are telling people to play along and stay put.
والله توجيه القيادة أن المواطنين يبقون في بيوتهم، هذا التوجيه العام. الآن بدأت الناس يعني بعمليات نزوح.
Who would? While army chiefs are telling people to stay, common sense and rescuers with all their experience are telling them to run.
طبعا إذا كان مسالك خروجهم أمينة الأفضل أن يغادروا لسبب واحد، لأنه عصابة داعش الإرهابية عمدت على تجميع المواطنين واعتبارهم ذروع بشرية.
And that's what these rescuers deal with, pulling the victims of airstrikes and ISIS bombs out of the wreckage of their former houses.
احنا الحمد لله المشاكل اللي نعاني منها يعني اغلب المشاكل هي نفس المواطن. عندما نذهب الى محل الحادث يصير تداخل بالعمل، يعني المواطنين اللي عندهم مثلا طفل او امراه. احنا عندنا وحدات عسكريه، جهد هندسي عسكري يقوم بعمليه رفع الالغام.
Imagine the stress. Unarmed, they dig night and day under constant fire in booby-trapped buildings and with distraught relatives breathing down their necks. And the workload isn't small.
إمكانيات دفاع مدني نوى بفريق النخبة وفريق البحث والإنقاذ.
اليوم خطة عمل عندنا أهداف في مدينة الموصل، منطقة موصل الجديدة، منطقة حينابلس.
Just another grim day in Mosul. Murad Gazdi, RT from Mosul, Iraq.
Despite accusations of the Mosul operation not protecting civilians, nonetheless, the US ambassador to the United Nations didn't hesitate to describe her country as the conscience of the world. But commenting on that, Russia's foreign ministry spokeswoman said America's conscience doesn't extend to suffering in other countries, it appears.
The United States is the moral conscience of the world. We will not walk away from this role.
If you are the conscience of the world, don't you see what happens to people in Yemen, for example? Or is it a new kind of conscience, a hybrid one, which doesn't send any signals to the brain or other world organs?
Well, a very bold statement indeed. Peter Ford's a former British ambassador to Syria and Bahrain. Let's see what he thinks about that. America, the conscience of the world, is that overplaying it a bit, do you think?
It certainly is. This lady is clearly a true believer in the Church of American exceptionalism, and she was speaking before the Council on Foreign Relations, which is one of the temples of this deviant creed. I'm afraid in this they mirror ISIS in their delusion and messianism. Was it the American conscience which came into play when they were engaged in killing over 80 innocent Syrian soldiers in Deir ez-Zor, an incident that occurred in September of last year? They mowed down over 80 and maimed over 100 in open desert. It was like a turkey shoot. The Americans have never apologized properly for that. In fact, they're running up quite a track record of these dreadful, dreadful mistakes. We just heard about the mistakes in Mosul, particularly the incident on, I think, the 17th of this month, when over 200 innocent people were killed. And still, the Americans are trying to make excuses for it. They're hinting that it wasn't really us, we may have triggered it, but it was ISIS who had laid bombs. Well, I ask you, this just lacks credibility.
Well, regarding Mosul, the US Central Command said it's more and more difficult to apply, quote, as they put it, extraordinarily high standards there in what's going on. I mean, nobody thinks for a minute they aren't up against it there and they don't have an extremely difficult task. But what do they mean by the fact they're saying it's more and more difficult to apply high standards? We're talking about human lives here. Does it actually mean the standards could get lower, judging by the horrendous casualty figures we've heard of at the moment? It's going to get worse than by the sounds of it.
Indeed, this is a clear signal that the standards are being lowered, that what the Americans like to call in the Mosul context collateral damage will just occur on a greater scale in the days to come. And, well, shrug of the shoulders, that's just too bad, isn't it? Whereas a lower level of civilian casualties in Aleppo, and on average, there were fewer than 20 a day in Aleppo. In Aleppo, the number is 3 or 4. In Mosul, the number is 3 or 4. In Aleppo, it was an atrocity, daily atrocities, whereas in Mosul, it's just collateral damage when it's perpetrated by the country which is the moral conscience of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it would appear that certainly regarding, if you want to compare and contrast it with what happened in Aleppo, there seem to be huge double standards playing out there, the way that America's looking at it now.
Absolutely, double standards, hypocrisy. The only mitigating thing one can say here is that the Americans do seem, in the Syria theater, to be becoming more realistic, whereas the Obama administration called repeatedly for Assad to be toppled. I noticed breaking news today that Rex Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, said that ultimately the Syrian people would have to decide what happened to their president.
Peter, we're going to leave it there. So there's more grim statistics coming each and every day from Mosul. As you say, it appears it's going to be getting worse, judging by what US Central Command is saying anyway, that standards are going to slip further. Peter Ford, former British ambassador to Syria.